Awesome. Okay, so we're here with Kayla Godin. Is that how that's pronounced? Kayla Godin? Or Godin?
Good. Yep.
And you're the author of Girls Gotta Eat from Not Just a Pretty Face, Women of Horror Volume 1. How are you doing tonight?
Yep. I'm great. Thanks. How are you?
Good, good. There's a lot of drama going on in small press right now, so I'm kind of, I just woke up, so I'm kind of trying to follow it and then trying to come over here and be more responsible. So,
Oh man. Yeah.
all right. So let's start. What about horror appeals to you as a writer?
That's the funny thing because I don't typically tend to write horror. I write a lot of poetry and very heavily fantasy based. Um, I do it like I do horror occasionally. Um, but I find that there's not a lot of accessible horror writers. Like we all know Stephen King and Joe Hill and very typical male writers and dense writing as well. It can be very hard to read sometimes. And so when I seen the call for Not Just a Pretty Face, I figured one, it was something to practice. I had done a short story named Teeth with Deadlight Publishing before, and it was a multi-authored short story. I also had to edit it as well, and that was the first kind of delve into horror that I had done, and I liked it, and I hadn't done horror since then, so I figured why not try it out, see what happens. So it worked well, apparently.
Yes, it did, and it's quite a fun story about a sort of vampire-y kind of, but there's also that
Yeah,
revenge. There's also that sort of revenge. So let's talk
yeah.
about your character. She goes through a couple of names through the story. How did you decide on writing a character like that? What inspired her?
Um, the idea of the seven deadly sins in the form of greed on the male character's end is actually what sparked it. And who goes out and collects on those sins? Um, because I mean, usually if there's a sin, there is a demon that goes along with it. Um, and she was my demon, my collector on the sin of greed, and specifically the greed of sex. He's very charming in a very sly, kind of gross way, and he is a rapist in the story, as well as committing adultery on his wife. And to me, that's a greed for that pleasure that he wants more and more and more of. So that was where she came in, the woman that collects on that to kind of avenge her fellow sister.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, he's a pretty nasty character, and he
He
enjoys
is.
seeing his comeuppance, right? uh,
Yeah.
so, so speaking, I mean, the seven deadly sins. Would you be interested? Would you be writing more of those? That would be kind of fun to see more
Oh,
stories
I'd be
about
happy
them.
to. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be kind of fun to see a full collection of them, right? So,
It would be.
yeah. Well, it's a thought, as you're writing. I
It is.
always. Do you ever yeah, do you ever find that one story leads to another, or do you want to try to sort of keep them self-contained?
Yes. I like short fiction. I find for one, because I'm disabled, it's easier. A novel, I just finished writing a novel, and it took me over a year and a half
Oh
to
my.
write it and edit it because I type very slow. A lot of it's typing with an on-screen keyboard, and you can talk into your computer, but I don't know, sometimes your brain doesn't function well when you have to talk it into a computer.
Yeah.
So the process is very slow. Whereas a short story I can do in a couple of days, and it's not a couple of years. Um, Whereas a poetry collection, I can do it in a month.
Nice.
So it's easy to produce. Um, and story collections are easy to produce. But a novel, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so long. What am I supposed to do with this?
Well, I
And
can tell
because I
you,
want to,
even fully able, some of us just can't produce like that either.
oh,
So
it's such a long process. And by the end of it, you want to be done with it. You don't want to look at it anymore.
yeah.
So yeah, short fiction, it's these bite-sized stories that doesn't take a lot to sit there and read it or to have to think too hard about it. It's nice.
Yeah, yeah, and I like the short format myself too, both as a reader and
Yeah.
as a writer. You know, you've got a few minutes at work or on your lunch hour or something, and you sit down and you just have this nice, satisfying little story. Then you can go on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So, um, um, did you want to talk about being a disabled author? I mean, we always talk about visibility
Oh yeah.
and being a minority, but it's very rare that we really talk about it. So,
That
what's your
minority.
yeah, what's your work private process? Like
So
how do you
the process is kind of hilarious. I was thinking about doing an Instagram post about this because quite literally, I'm working on a laptop with a drawing board, like an electric drawing board, as a mouse, propped up on a dinner table and some books.
oh my.
Like one of those foldable TV trays. And that's what it looks like to sit in front of my wheelchair. And then it's slow. I don't have any other job. This is my writing is what I'm doing. I'm very lucky to be able to do that full time. But full time for me is like 2 or 3 hours in the day because that's all I can handle.
Right.
And like quite literally, your arm drops and that's it. You're done. And yeah, you don't get much of a choice. So that's what it looks like visually. And so a lot of the rest of my day is planning and reading. I consume a lot of books. Um, like our library is over 500 books.
I see it
And
behind
I
you there.
can,
It's nice.
yeah, it's our most happy room in the house. We enjoy it very much. So the process, like I said, it's long and lots of it is getting somebody else to help me with it and walking them through it. Um, so yeah, it's the writing is not any different than anybody else's writing. You sit there, you do it, you make yourself do it like any other job.
Yeah.
Because if you don't get that writing muscle. Creativity is only part of it. It's also a job.
Yeah. Well,
So
I'm glad that you are able to do that sort of thing and be expressive. That's wonderful. That's really great that you and also
yeah,
that you have some tools available at your disposal.
yeah.
So speaking of inspiration, now we talked about the seven deadly sins. What would some of your other where do some of your other ideas come from?
Yeah.
And what
Um,
other?
on just that story,
In general, what else do you like to write about?
as a minority, I like to write actually trends that came prior to the trends that are out now, where you didn't see characters with disability. That's one of my poetry. It is a character in itself with a disability. I write about what I go through, and it's not something you see very often,
Yeah.
even in poetry. And there's so many minorities that don't get that chance to tell their life and tell who they are. And I like telling it through poetry or through fiction of some other kind. I will never write a biography. Oh God. But that those characters have lives too. Those characters exist because we exist. So why shouldn't they? So a lot of those stories come from like the whole Magic Academy trend that was very popular a couple of years ago with the magicians. Um, it's done a little bit of a comeback with the Ninth House by Lee Bardugo, but not in a character that's disabled or a minority of any kind. So I think those stories still need to be told.
Yeah.
And I'll try to tell my own while I'm at it.
Yeah, that's great. Um, we were talking about that last night, that you see so many stories about, angry young men and able-bodied people and so on, but it's like, sometimes we just like to
How
hear
many
from
of
different
those
kinds
do
of
we
people.
have?
Yeah, exactly. How many of those do we have? How many of those do we hear? Whereas, we don't hear that. Why we just want to hear different kinds of people, right? And people complaining,
Yeah,
oh,
to
you're so,
identify with them.
yeah, and people are like, oh, you're so politically correct. You have to have this. It's like, no, I just want to hear from different kinds of people. And there's so many of us out here.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's great. And
Yep.
and it's great that you have a platform, and yeah, why not write about disabled people? You could write a biography, you could write about your life. That would be interesting, I'm sure, to somebody, right?
Well, thank you.
Well, you mentioned you have a library of over 500 books. What do you like to read, and what kind of authors?
Oh, we have lots of fantasy. So much fantasy. Um, I've just started getting into like the adult romances, not like Norse, but I just finished reading Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert,
Okay.
and the main character in that book is Black and has fibromyalgia. So the chronic pain that she goes through, you can identify with as well because, I mean, in a wheelchair, there's some chronic pain that comes with that. So that one was very good. We read a lot of fantasy though. Um, I like good horror when I can find it. Um, that can be a hard one though. When it
Great.
comes to horror, I like shows, movies, the visual scare.
Horror has just been gold lately. There have been so many great horror movies and TV shows coming out,
Yes.
and I hopefully once all the isolation's over, we'll get to see some more good shows coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Um.
actually been some very good YA horror lately.
Yeah.
Like
Got any
I just
recommendations?
at the beginning of the year I read sorry?
I was just gonna ask for recommendations. I've been writing down books that people have
Yeah.
been recommending lately. So.
Wilder Girls by Rory Power. It's people say it's a lot like a Lord of the Flies retelling.
Oh,
And
cool.
I can see that with the isolation on an island. But there's so much if you like body horror where it's very grotesque. I like that kind of stuff.
Nice. Yeah, there's some of that in your story too, and
Oh,
Charles
just a
Honey.
little.
Yeah, cool. I will have to check that out. So do you have any other work available for us to read, purchase, buy out there?
I have my first poetry collection. It came out January of 2019, and it's called Witchcraft and Monsters.
Awesome.
And then in October, actually this year, on the 31st, so Halloween, I have my second poetry collection coming out called The Veil.
Amazing. That's great. I'll have to have a look for those.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, was there anything else you wanted to talk about? We should probably wrap this up soon, but
No, that's whatever you wanted to ask.
cool. Well, it's nice having a chat with you tonight. Have a great night and stay safe. Lots of scary stuff going on out there.
Oh, I keep myself closed in like a hermit.
All right. Have a great night.
Thanks, you too. Bye bye.
Bye.